بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. How are you, students? This is your teacher Hakim Al-Sakran speaking. How are you today? I hope that you're fine and that you are excited about today's lesson. Before we begin today's lesson, let's review and have a revision for last lesson's lesson. It was a conversation between Ahmed and his friend Abdullah, as you can see from the picture here, about Abdullah's graduation. He is inviting Ahmed to his graduation. And of course, we read the whole conversation and we learned as much as we can from it. So let me ask you a few questions about the conversation. The real talk. We learned some words that that in the last lesson. Let's revise them today. The first one is no way. Can you remember what does it mean when someone tells you no way? Yes, that's correct. No way, it means, it used to say when you won't allow something. It means that you're saying no. Can you give me this? No way. Absolute no. The second word is let someone down. To let someone down. You let your father down, your friend down. What does it mean? With an example. Yes. Very good. It means disappointed. Disappointed. To let someone down, it means that you disappoint them. The third word is of course. Of course you know this word. Of course you know of course. So what does it mean? It means to give someone permission or encouragement. To give someone permission or encouragement. When he asks you, can I do this? You say, of course. A strong yes. Encouragement. Permission. Yes. The last word is be straight. When your friend tells you be straight with me, it means be. Yes, it means be honest or be frank, which means tell me the truth. So let's begin today's lesson reading. As you can see from the pictures here and from the title, from smoke signals to email, keeping in touch. From smoke signals to email, keeping in touch. From these pictures, can you guess the theme or the main theme of this passage that we're going to read? The main theme, the main idea, some of the ideas? Yes, give me some. Yes, okay. That's good. What do you think the central theme is? As you said, the central theme will be communication. Communication. Yes, that's correct. So let's begin our passage, but first let's hear it from our reader. From smoke signals to email, keeping in touch. Let's listen.
Page 12. 9. Reading.
From smoke signals to email, keeping in touch. From the Stone Age to the present, people have shown a desire to send messages to one another over long distances. In ancient times, according to one story, a chain of fires on mountaintops was used to relate the news of the fall of Troy to the people in Greece. In the past, native people in the Americas used smoke from fires to transmit messages. They developed a code in which certain combinations of smoke rising had special meanings. For example, 2 parallel columns of smoke indicated the successful return of a war party.
The ancient Greeks established lines of signal towers at mountaintops. At each one, a large fire was lit to transmit a signal to the next tower, and in this way, information was passed on through the land. Also, almost anything that makes a noise has been used for signaling. A kind of drum talk is still used in Central Africa today, although few who are not natives have been able to understand it. The sender uses a drum that can produce a high or low tone. Because the local dialect alternates in these tones, the sender is able to simulate speech with the drums.
So when we finish these two paragraphs, let's discuss something. So these are means to communicate or sending messages from long distances. Can you guess, can you give me two examples that were mentioned in these two paragraphs? Yes, you can see the first time is a chain of fire on mountain tops. And the second one is, Yes, that's correct. Signal towers at mountain tops. Yes, there's a large fire, which they put a large fire. That's correct. You can also say that there's a special signal here with two parallel columns of smoke to indicate successful return of the party. This is sending a special message. So let's continue to the passage, the other paragraphs. Let's listen.
In modern times, people have communicated by letter, telegraph, and telephone. But no one method has become as widespread as quickly as the use of email. The first email message took place in 1971. According to its sender, Ray Tomlinson, it was probably the following: QWERTYUIOP. What was significant about that? Nothing, really. This is just the top row of keys on an English language keyboard. Tomlinson was just testing out the system and using a nonsense message. He had no concept that he was going to start a revolution in communication. Tomlinson was one of a group of scientists who were working on developing better computers. The scientists at his site were able to send a message to a mailbox on the computer on their site. Other scientists could view the message in the mailbox. But there were other computers at other sites where scientists were working on the same project. Tomlinson's idea was to figure out a way to deliver messages to mailboxes on those remote computers. He used the @ sign to identify messages that were headed out of the local machine to the more distant ones. That was the start of the emailing system that we still use today.
So, as you can see on this page or in these paragraphs, he talked about the modern way to communicate. Can you locate the words that say that? Yes, that's correct. He said by letter, telegraph, and telephone. But the most common one and the most widely spread one these days is, of course, the email. Of course, the email. So, moving on.
At first, the number of people on email was small, but by the end of the 20th century, there were 263 million email boxes. In the 21st century, that figure has grown to over 2 billion, and the functions of email services in the future will become more and more diversified. And text messaging on cell phones is also increasing, so people can, in effect, be in constant touch with people who are long distances away.
So, when we finish this passage, now you know how to communicate, how people used to communicate in long distances, and how they communicate today, and you learn some information about the invention or the beginning of the email. So, I have to ask you a question. Find all the sentences, or this is a task actually, find all the sentences that talk about the different means of communication. Again, you have to read it again by yourself. Find all the sentences in this passage that talk about the difference or the different means of communication. Of course, when you read the passage, there are some means of communication that were mentioned. I'm asking you to find the sentences that these means of communications were mentioned in. So now you can pause the video and read the passage again and guess, or not guessing, try to find these sentences. Again, the sentences where the means of communication in the past time and the present time were mentioned. So I'll give you 2 minutes to pause the video and come back to me. Read the passage. Okay, let's continue. The first one is, Yes, that's correct. A chain of fires on mountaintops. A chain of fires on mountaintops, because if the mountaintop is really high, and if you put a large fire, it will be seen from long distances. So if you made a chain of fires through mountains, it will travel very long distances actually. The second one is smoke from smoke from fires to transmit messages. Smoke from fires to transmit messages. We've seen lots of pictures where they use messages from smokes, black smoke, white smoke. As mentioned in this passage, the parallel smokes, which means they returned safely. Yes, smoke was widely known in the past. Signal towers that people shouted from. You're correct. Signal towers that people shouted from. Peoples who have high vocal cords, they can shout from high places in the towers, so they can all the people can hear them. Drum talk. Drum talk. I will ask you about this later. Drum talk. How do they talk? How can you make the drum sounds like real talk? And the last one is, of course, the modern way, by letter, telegraph, telephone, email. Of course, nowadays, in the 21st century, we have too many ways of communication, too many ways. You know, the social media and the smartphones, we have too many ways of communication, which make our lives really easy. So moving on, comprehension. So you've heard the passage and you've read it. So I have some comprehension questions for you, and I hope and I know that you will answer them. Let's begin. So the first comprehension question I want to ask you about is, what does the reading say about fire and signaling? Again, what does the reading say about fire and signaling? Now you've read the passage and you've heard it. Of course, you know, you can go back to the passage if you want, but I know that you know the answer just by reading it once. The question again, what does the reading say about fire and signaling, using this fire? Who used it? Where? Yes, that's correct. Fire was used in ancient Greece, by the Greeks, of course, to pass information through the land. As we read before, it was used on the top of the mountains. They used it to send signals through long distances, very long distances. So again, fire was used in ancient Greece to pass information through the land. Very good. That's the first question. The second question is, how? Pay attention to the first word, how. How does the drummer simulate speech? Again, how does the drummer simulate speech? I told you before that I'm going to ask you about this piece of information. How does the drummer simulate speech? He has a drum and he wants to signal people in a way that's almost like a speech. How? Very good. By changing the tone. By changing the tone, that's correct. So one time he hits the drum with the high tone, and the other time he hits the drum with the low tone. So it's almost like a speech. It's almost like a speech. Next question is, why did Tomlinson use at? Tomlinson, the inventor of the email, of course you've read the passage. Why? Why did Tomlinson use at? You can get back to the passage. Why did he invent or use the at signal? Of course, you know this at signal. Now we all use it when we want to write our emails. Again, why did Tomlinson use the at signal? Yes, that's correct. To signal that messages were for the distant computers, not the near computers, the distant computers. So he wants to differentiate the distances of the messages of the computers that they were sent to. Again, the answer is the signal that, so the at signal is used for what? To signal that messages were for the distant computers. Again, so this is the main answer. The distant computers, not the near computers, no, the distant computers. So after reading questions, we have now, after reading questions, here you have to fill the gap. Here you have to fill the gaps. The first one, people have shown a need to communicate with one another since. Again, people have shown a need to communicate with one another since. Yes, that's correct. Since the Stone Age. The Stone Age. The Stone Age. Humanity wants to communicate with each other from the beginning of time, since the Stone Ages. The second one, when Native Americans saw two columns of smoke, the two columns of smoke, what did they signal to? Again, the Native Americans saw, when Native Americans saw two columns of smoke, what does it mean? Yes, they knew that a war party was returning and that it was successful. When they saw two columns of smoke, they knew that there's a war party that's coming back and that the mission was successful. The third one, although drums are used in Central Africa to communicate messages, only a few non-natives. What? Again, although drums are used in Central Africa to communicate messages, only a few non-natives, yes, can understand the drum language. Of course, from the sound of it, it looks like a pretty hard language. So a few non-natives can understand the drum language. A few of them, not a lot of them, a few. Of course, the natives, all of them understand the drum language. So, and the fourth one, when Tomlinson sent his first message, he wasn't thinking of what? Again, when Tomlinson sent his first message, he wasn't thinking of what? Yes, he wasn't thinking of starting a revolution in communication. He didn't know. He didn't know that this at signal will start a revolution in the ways that we communicate until today. Until today. He wasn't thinking of starting a revolution in communication. The fifth one, although email only began in the 1970s, by the end of the 20th century, what? Although email only began in the 1970s, by the end of the 20th century, yes, there were 263 million email boxes. There were 263 million email boxes. Of course, now in the 21st century, this number has grown more and more and more, of course. And the last one, nowadays, millions of people are used to, again, nowadays, millions of people are used to what? Yes, that's correct. Are used to being in constant touch with people who are long distances away. Are used to being in constant touch with people who are long distances away. As I said before, now with the smartphones and with the social media apps, you can communicate with anyone on this planet within seconds, maybe less. So now we are used to communicating with each other. And this is the end of our lesson today. Hopefully to see you next lesson, inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.